Uh, Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the Simsr Alum Body and the Simsr Institute, I welcome you to today's discussion, Share Ask the Alum, where we've started this series, and this is the last of the current series, where we discuss the possible fallout of COVID. So we've talked about this all week long, and today we are actually discussing on post-COVID, what are the likely business models, given that there will be a completely new sandbox. A lot of questions were asked on what is the sandbox all about. So I just want to reiterate that the sandbox comprises of the entire ecosystem that has existed around businesses forever. We are going to treat it as a virtual sandbox, and all of you are aware that a sandbox consists an environment in which you use materials such as land, labor, capital. You use these resources to assemble an organization and deliver whatever is your vision. With the flux of time and obviously challenges that have posed on the economic front in the past, a lot of technology tools have become part of the sandbox. Of the original 4, land, labor, capital, we found technology coming in as a major player, and along with technologies, a lot of other resources such as IoT, such as data sciences, such as e-commerce have got themselves business intelligence. They've got embedded in the sandbox, and all these operations are converging in a manner of speaking, where we are finding challenges on the survival front for organizations. We all know that over a period of time, all the organizations at some point or the other have to die. It doesn't matter who you are, how good you are. If you're born, you will die. Some live for 30 years, some live for 40 years, some live for 100 years, some have lived for 200 years. Some die at the peak of success, being obsolete. So COVID, from that point of view, is an exciting opportunity for rebirth for many organizations. Those who see an opportunity in this economic backdrop will be the ones who will survive and do better, will have greater market share. And to that effect, we have assembled a team of all our past alums who've got global footprint, as Arvind already briefed you, across different sectors. So I'm going to pull them in one by one to talk about their experiences on what the landscape really is today and where it is going. Right? So their business models are in challenges, their geographies are in throes of difficulties. This is one situation where the whole world is facing an almost similar threat. And with a few exceptions, the gradations vary in terms of threat, in terms of effect, but the threat is real, and the threat to business life is even more real. And business life, as you know, impacts jobs, it impacts livelihood, it impacts economics, it impacts nations. There is many believe there is a race amongst on for the number one nation in the world. So there is a lot happening. Currency itself is in a twirl, because we don't know which currencies will survive, which currencies will fall by the wayside, and how much. So it makes sense to pick up from the geographies how their respective units across different verticals are doing. So we'll start with Shubhra, who's the only lady on the panel, and ladies first is the maximum. So Shubhra, maybe you can share with us the geography, your rich experience in FMCG, what you see happening in Singapore and the APAC area, what do you see in your own space, how do you see it impacting, and what are you doing to mitigate the risk?
All right, thanks, Anuj. Shubhra. Okay, thanks, Anuj. So just to let you know, I'm going to start a little bit on the global, go to regional and then local. So think yourself as a marketing director of a global company, and you have to manage like at least 50 countries. And you're talking about the simple marketing mixes. I think everybody knows by heart what it is. So let's start from simple, like supply chain. Supply chain is disrupted. When I say disrupted, then simple things like what we are actually struggling with, and most of the CPG companies are, although you might be in essential, you will understand that it is not diversified enough. So you have to go and review quickly, plan now, act now. Then at the same time, you would also see the advertising and media scene is completely changed. The marketing director is fighting with the finance guys that, hey, I want to have this brand health as of now. And then what is the new norm going to be? So what do I do to at least have that brand health now? Or even today, if I'm in the essential, do I visit my portfolio or not? So when I talk about portfolios, simple things like product mixes, that if I have premium product, I have mainstream product, I have economy product. In the recovery or the stabilization mode, what is going to be there? What are your simple packs? Am I going to have units? I'm going to have this promo packs, or I'm going to have bundle packs? What is the pricing? It looks very simple and intuitive. Think about that you have to do for 46 market within 2 weeks time, and how you would do and how would you recover back. And even if you're recovering back, you have to be very agile in terms of decision making. This is the during the recovery, this is during the stabilization mode. So the new business model that we are seeing now is highly collaborative. Plan now, act now in terms of data. And this is really, really going to be very key. The hierarchies have gone down. You would be actually going ahead and talking to finance, sales and marketing and distribution at the every day, cross-cultural you would be talking, cross-regions you would be talking, and there will be no one strategy that will be fitting all. So think yourself, even in India, if you think about yourself, if there are little Indias in one India, it's not going to be the same. Hey, Anuj?
Yeah, we can
that's
hear
all
you.
From me. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, that the overall business model in terms of recovery is going to be very, very different. Now, there would be consumer pull that would be actually going ahead and changing it. So for example, things that we see in beauty products, I'm talking from my Unilever example. Beauty products, people will say, hey, it's going to go down. But I know some of them have survived for sure, because they just changed their pack quickly. So if instead of they were selling so big, they're selling so small, and they change their distribution channels completely. Now, when I talk about changing of distribution channels, it's not only about e-commerce, which is highly inflated. We all know that e-commerce is going to play well. I'm talking about simple technology items like, you can have vending machines, you can have self-serve kiosks. How you are going to cater in emerging markets like India and China to rural communities. So rural communities have been set up quite well in these two regions, I know for sure, to even go beyond the essentials and then just push it across. So that is the new business model that we see. And most of the CPG companies, which were not the technology companies that we see across, is now becoming like more of what we call exponential organizations, with the CTOs and data coming out very strongly in band 2 and band 3 cities. That's all from me.
Awesome, Shubhra. So what I hear you saying is apparently hierarchies are going. I see automation coming in a bigger way. I see that organizations will turn flattish. There will be a change in the organization design. You were saying that collaboration will be the key, and obviously convergence across functional areas is happening very fast, which means that it's a program that talks to a program and not a person to a person to enable faster decision making.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep.
Good. So, which is interesting because I think a lot of you, when you have studied your MBA, you have done your enterprise planning systems. Yeah. So when you've done your enterprise planning systems, you actually build these modules one by one, brick by brick, so that they would communicate. So in the evolution you started with a materials plan, and you had an MRP, which moved to an ERP, which moved to a CRM plus supply chain management, which eventually moved to an enterprise system. So fortunately, we have got Daya, who's based in US with KPMG, who can share his geography, and he can bring in with the enterprise components on how he sees this discussion going. So over to you, Daya.
We can't hear Daya.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. So thanks, Anuj. I think, again, overall, I think, I'm working in a big four company. We do see some kind of, big change in the shift because of recent changes in terms of, enterprise planning or, consulting world, right? If you look at, as a customer, as an end user, how each and every customer is looking at it differently today. And their expectations are changed because of, a lot of travel is avoided in part of consulting world. And if you do a business consulting with different customers, clients, whereas, consulting, we used to go to clients, look at, work with them and plan their systems, like, if you look at manufacturing or supply chain or any other area. But now I think it's more like a remote consulting. It become a remote consulting work, right? And customers are expecting a different way in terms of how we can handle this kind of situation without face-to-face meetings. And recent past, we have been using, coming with the different ideas where to use Zoom or use other applications, media application, where we can interact with customers, attend meetings, those kind of things, right? And I mean, still it's kind of some areas still we need to identify how we can handle, and especially for supply chain side, right? If you want to set up a warehouse, how we can handle those kind of things until we go and face to face and see the warehouse and all those things, set up the infrastructure in place. Building a system in backend we can do it, but at least setting up the warehouse, we need to have this, look at the warehouse, and it's completely automated. Now we have to look at different ideas. And in fact, recently, I think, as you mentioned earlier, Anuj, the data science, right, is playing more key role, and robotics, right, robotics automation. People are talking about, AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. So those are people are trying to adapt some of the new technologies. It's not an easy shift for the customers, like end users, and customers, across the globe, because it impacts, different things, right? They have to change the back systems. They have to change, it's a people, process, and change, right? So it's more like it's not a big, it's a big shift from the everybody because of recent changes, right? So those are the things I think I see, big change. Again, still we are working on different, strategies, or different, trying to adapt different options. And I think we are looking at customers also trying to get it adapt to those kind of new approaches, what we are proposing it. So Anuj, and over to you.
Okay, so Daya, does it mean that you see a role which is shifting from plain cookie cutter ERP, EPS implementations to consulting-led implementations finally, and work from home finally delivering results?
It is. Basically, I think work from home, I always see in the US where, going to one client place, it take 2-3 hours, in a day, almost, I commute to goes on 4 hours time in some locations, especially I live in California and Bay Area. So I see 4 hours commute for 2 hours one way, and one way coming with 2 hours. I think that's 4 hours maybe more productive for customers. I look at it. I see customers where I in calls, from conference calls in the morning to evening. So that may be more productive than, traveling to the client side. So I do see the customers are seeing some difference on that angle.
Super. So we are talking about speed here. When we think of speed, we think of people like Mehul. Mehul has got onto the speed bandwagon. So I will not, without taking away any of his thunder, let Mehul talk about his speed and what he sees happening in his geography, and how he sees his vertical being affected, which is a significant vertical for sports lovers.
Yeah, thank you, Anuj. And first up, hope all of you and your loved ones are really doing well and staying safe. Great initiative by Simsr to get all of us together to talk to you. And as I see, in terms of my industry, so I'm part of a digital media company, and we support a lot of automotive and racing action in terms of how it reaches to audiences. And before that, I used to be with a telecommunications company. So if bringing some of those elements is what I thought I'll touch upon. Clearly, we are in extraordinary times, right? And as coronavirus is impacting mostly people with underlying conditions, that's the same for businesses. And that's why, how do we look at our businesses as this point of time and keep them in shape and be fighting fit to survive is one of the fundamental things that we're looking at, right? And we've personally got impacted immediately, because if a race gets cancelled, then here you go. You can't create the editorial content, you can't sell tickets. What do you do next, right? And hence, if you look at it, and I know that a lot of the people listening in right now onto this call are students, think of how this will help you with a lot of learning and a lot of opportunity, right? This is probably one of the biggest crises the world has seen in the last 100 years, or probably for the next 100 years, right? And see how this will shape up our individual characters, our learning, our leadership skills. kind of I think most of us who are on the panel right now, we've gone through at least 2 global crises. One in the year 2000 with the dot-com bust that happened. And interestingly, that was a year when I actually joined an internet company, right? And in 2008, when again the global economic crisis happened, and we were actually again as an organization at that time thinking of growing globally. So if you look at it, each time when something like that happened, it gave us a new opportunity. And hence the topic today of this new sandbox is really interesting, because if we think of it, what are the areas that are really coming through that we can lean on? And I'll give some practical examples from my industry as we touch upon it. I think there are 3 things which really matter. Money matters, execution matters, and people matters, right? So if I look at it, what's happened for us is cash flows have immediately got impacted. And hence, every member of our team now, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in operations, whether you're in editorial staff, how do you start getting a clear revenue focus? How do you start looking at every aspect of how can I create more revenue? So one of the things that we did immediately started putting up esports events. So you can't actually see live action on the telly. Otherwise, can you now actually see live action with esports? So thinking of revenue, thinking of cost, right? And cost is huge. And I know some of us have marketing backgrounds, some of us have HR backgrounds, some have operations background. But never more has it been important that all of us have that understanding of what is the outcome with every dollar that I'm spending. So money matters is something that we're doing. We're getting every member of our staff to understand what are they spending on and is it actually delivering an outcome. Linked to that is execution. Because while we keep planning, and believe me right now, half the day actually goes in thinking of what is the next plan that you build, and the plan gets outdated in a week's time with the pace at which the market is moving, executing to it and actually ensuring that you're able to get the collaboration done. And Dayakar touched upon it, that while you're working remotely, how do you get your teams to truly collaborate? And all of you in college right now, you're actually coming in at a time when this is seamless. Doing a Zoom call is seamless. But that's not how the entire industry is, right? So how do you get people to come together and get the execution still done while you're working remotely is another big area that we are seeing getting and working towards. And the third, the most important one is people matters. It's not easy, right? It's easy to say that, okay, now you should have more time. And actually, it's quite interesting. People keep sending on WhatsApp, you should have more time now. You can learn a new skill. You can learn cooking. You could do this. You could do that. But the fact is that we are actually all more busy than what we've been otherwise, right? So how do you keep the morale up of the team? How do you work towards the mental health of your team members, your customers, build that empathy, build that trust that even if I don't see you, I trust that you're delivering to the organization is something that, again, we're trying to do a lot on, especially with our remote teams. So the 3 things that I would urge you all to look at and focus on as you build out your thinking and you do next projects, right, as you're passing out from college, is money matters, execution matters, and people matters, right? So thank you, and over to you, Anuj.
Thanks, Mehul. So clearly what you're seeing is all this is great, but execution challenge stays. So execution challenge will continue to stay. I think it always stayed. Things have become slightly logistically more difficult in such a challenging environment. And I think the current BCPs that we are seeing in the world fail are because of the logistic challenges, because one never expected the logistics or the supply chain to really cram up the way it has. Airlines are falling out of the skies. Nothing is really happening. We don't see what is the future for them. And it's funny that, how just a 30-day shutdown has sent so many organizations down a deep whirlpool of financial mess, which means their life, well, they were just living hand to mouth, really speaking. And because if you can't even withstand 1 month's pain, obviously you are no kind of a champion, right? So you're definitely not a champion organization in that respect. So clearly your sport is one of them, which is a champion sport and should have moved there. So I'm saving Anil for the last because he comes in with a business excellence kind of view, apart from his rich experience in technology, where he will talk about putting all that you guys have talked about in terms of would be a new organization looking at excellence? So I can go next to Tanvir and talk about how he comes in from a trading paradise, and where obviously his exposure to finance there has been significant. He's worked on financial services, he's worked on cards, so he's got a quasi financial background where he can touch upon the impact on these services and how they are going to facilitate or become the catalyst for ongoing future, given that card companies are seeing a challenge and a significant dip in utilization.
Yeah, thanks, Anil. And hello to everyone. And I think there are a lot of current students also watching this. So a big welcome to them. And I must tell them that they are actually incredibly lucky to have seen this challenge, what is going on currently, this COVID-19 thing at present, because they are about to start their careers and they are seeing this. We, as Mehul said and as Dayakar said, we have seen 9/11, we have seen the 2008, and we have seen other things also, job losses, a whole lot of things going topsy-turvy. These students, they are starting with a bang. What could be a bigger challenge than this, what is going on? And as Mehul said, 100 years before it must have happened, and another 100 years, this won't happen, inshallah. So I think it's a great time for students to learn. And I've heard about a lot of students where I come across, and my daughter's friends and other college going students, the fresh MBAs, they are saying that there will be no placements and there is nothing in the market. In fact, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This will get over. If not today, maybe after 15 days, a month or so, that's it. I hope it doesn't go further. So this will get over, and then we'll see a new world. See, right now, what we are seeing is that earlier we used to travel and it was just geography, but geography has become history now. At the moment, geography is history at the moment. So it's a new era. We're entering into a new era. And it's, as I said, it's a great thing for the students, but for us who are in the middle of a career, or some of us are about to, but someone like me, we can never be at the end of the careers till we die. And as Anil said, see, as it's being witnessed across the world, the outbreak is not only causing strain and growth of all sectors, particularly hospitality, tourism, aviation, retail. Hence, the banking sector, which I work in, is eventually facing the heat with interest rates slashed by central banks throughout the world. As we all know, that the banking sector sits at the heart of the economy. Thus, its stability is critical to keep the system up and running. Now, for us, the UAE banking industry continues to receive strong support from the government here, which we are lucky. The Central Bank of UAE is actively working with all the banks have announced a number of measures and resources which will not only increase the liquidity in the banking sector, but will also provide the much needed stability in these critical times. And most of the major banks, all of us, are giving a payment holiday to individuals and SMEs who are suffering because of the outbreak of this COVID. So if we talk of UAE, a study of McKinsey and Company last year in 2019 showed that 48% of the population are already willing to open online bank accounts. Similarly, SMEs and big corporates are also favoring the same, because digital banking, as they feel, banks with a strong digital infrastructure can provide them with faster transaction, better time, better convenience, and greater access to data and insights. Now, where I was working with Network International about 10 years back. For the past 10 years, I've been with Finance House. Now, Network International, we were dealing with, and till today, when I'm doing my this thing, I'm talking to MasterCard, JCB, Visa, Diners, Union Pay. I'm constantly in touch with them, and their numbers, in spite of the digital banking, in spite of online shopping, they've gone down considerably. So now, what is left for all of us in the banking system is just to go digital. We as Finance House are coming up with a whole lot of things, even cards, everything is, we have WhatsApp banking. customers, instead of trying to call up the customer care, I think in India, you must be knowing it. US, it happens, Singapore, London, of course, that it's now you're getting into WhatsApp. The customer can just straight away WhatsApp a message and he can get his card balance and everything. So the future is just digital, just online banking, where I'm just coming from a banking background and a cards background. So that's it. And we all are trying to show, as we said, we are, as Mehul said, we are, people are saying that there's a lot of time, do new things, nothing. We are more busy. We're having about 10 Zoom calls every day, and we are trying to show at the office that we are more busy of trying to keep our jobs intact. And so is the team. So we have to look at the team also, whether they're actually doing anything or they're just sitting and sending across mails. So things are difficult for all of us. And as I said to the students who are watching this, things are going to be better, and they should be very confident and look forward to a bright future. That's about all. Thank you.
So Tanvir, thanks for a summary. Two quick questions that come to my mind that affect your geography in the Middle East the most. One is the price of oil. And we know it's been yo-yoing to ridiculous levels in the past. It's gone negative for as long as I can remember. I haven't seen it there. And the second is, since we are going digital, though crypto is knocking on the door for a long time, it lacks sovereign guarantees.
Yes.
So do you think currencies would also go digital sooner or later? And is your banks...
Not in the near future. I don't think 100% it can happen. No. And I don't think it should happen. I don't think it should happen. On a personal level, I don't think so.
So where do you see oil as a finance house?
See, oil, this was coming. As it is, it was coming. But then, as luck would have it, the bigger impact came. This thing would have come and it would have taken another 3 to 4 years. But with the outbreak, it came on too suddenly. And now we are in the middle of all this and we have to face this. So time will tell. We can come out with any sort of jargons. We can come out with any sort of our own views. But time will tell. Once this outbreak is over, once we get out in the market, then we'll come to know what's the real thing. So the real test is coming now and we have to be geared up for that.
Super, Tanvir. Thanks. So I think the stage is set for Anil really to walk in, who's perhaps one of the most senior panelists on the panel here. So Anil, you've seen this disparate views, though most of them are consistent and similar. So the world is finally speaking one language, is working on a similar platform, is doing work from home, is facing a similar challenge. So obviously the world will react faster and address faster. Now your specialty of late has been in actually building excellence into businesses. A lot of these concepts that are being thrown around, you measure, you benchmark, and you move them around. So where do you see TBM, which is the benchmark of excellence in India, and perhaps one of the best benchmarks in the world outside of Malcolm Baldrige? How do you see this being addressed by TBM, and how do you see organizations actually trying to align the business excellence model in their own organizations for survival? So first is obviously mitigate, then we'll talk about growing.
Thank you, Anuj. Just want to start off before I get to the specific point that you asked. I think the world today is like driving a car with a thick fog. The fog lights are not working, so your windscreen is blurred. You can sort of do the wipers at the fullest of speed. You have a rear view mirror which is not being able to tell you what is behind you. You have a side window which tells you objects in the mirror may be closer than they appear. So you have anything and everything that you don't know can hit you. And anyway, driving a vehicle has always its blind spots. When somebody comes in from the right hand side or the left hand side, there is always a small time frame when you don't know what's going to hit you. So I think today running any business is like driving a car with thick fog, your fog lights not being effective, and you don't know what's going to hit you from back, from front, from behind. And if you look back, that's the way organizations are today. What's going to change? I think it's as good a guess as anybody has today. If you had asked this question in February, the biggest worry most companies globally had supply chain disruptions from China. My business will be impacted because I may not have inventory. Come March, the things started shifting a bit. Come April, everybody now says we are impacted, we will be suffering, and so on and so forth. And China is now looking at it differently. China is saying, no, where will I sell my goods? So depending upon the time frame in which we are working, or depending upon the mood of the people, we are trying to just look at how things are going to happen. And a sandbox environment, if I were to go to the classical definition, is where you simulate the real life environment, try and test new things before you take it to a production environment as a classical software sense. Today, organizations need to create multiple sandboxes within their organization to see what kind of changes may happen in the consumer behavior. And when I'm using the word consumer, it is not just the FMCG, like purchasing of an air conditioner or a beer or a discretionary spending like a house. It is also talking about the behavior of the B2B companies, the big corporates, and the way they are going to make their buying decisions. Do organizations spend enough time on creating the small sandboxes within their organization and spending this time that's available in deep fog to see what could happen? And therefore, what is it, the new business model? People are talking about consumer sentiments. People are talking digital will be the way forward. But the more important is the business model changes that can be brought in are far more profound. We need to sort of anticipate what are those business model changes we will need to bring in, and what are those multiplicity of the variety that will be there in front of us, which we need to look for. If I were to give you one simple example, in terms of real estate, most people across the globe will hesitate to spend money on buying a house at this point of time, probably. The companies which are into mortgage finance will now don't know whom to lend to. The people who are into discretionary spending like air conditioners, interior designing, televisions, they will be only dependent upon replacement demand. So there is plethora of changes that one change is going to have a cascading effect on the changes in multiplicity of industries. Today, organizations have to look at not just their immediate consumer, but consumer, and so on and so forth, and see what could be impacting me. And I think the time that companies have between now and when things begin to open up into a new normalcy, we have to spend creating those virtual sandboxes, trying to see what kind of business models we might need to create, and therefore, what is it that is going to drive us from the organization perspective. If I were to look at the excellence framework, very briefly, it always had a question to companies that if your organization needs to have a rapid change of your plans due to any change in the environment, how prepared are you? And most companies would come back and say, but my industry doesn't have any rapid changes. It's a stable industry. Nothing is going to much change about it. Yes, there is some consumer behavior change, but it will happen over a long period of time. Changes to electric vehicle will take probably 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Alternative to steel could be very long time, and so on and so forth. Did anybody anticipate the changes that we are talking today? If I were to go back and look at risk management, I was facilitating a webinar on risk management on 12th of February with a top risk manager of a company. There was not a mention about the likely impact of this on the organization or on the global spending due to this. And the company has spent a lot of time and money on scenario planning. 2 weeks later, I was doing a webinar with a real estate company. And again, the question was, China is able to build hospitals in 2 weeks. It was the capability to build something faster, but whether the hospital building capabilities will be required in India as of last week of February, again, didn't hit companies. So the fact remains that what is today in front of us is completely foggy. As an organization and as individuals, we need to reflect on what are the kind of various business models that we need to create. And for that, you need to invest into creating those virtual sandboxes. The strategy team should actually be focusing on creating those virtual sandboxes and make people busy in trying to anticipate. There is enough reports from PwC and KPMG and McKinsey, but they keep changing every single day. So you cannot rely upon those business presentations because they put a disclaimer. This is valid only as of the day of printing. Tomorrow, I don't know what will change. So organizations have to look forward and say, what is it? Look into the future and try and create what is going to happen. And therefore, how well will I be prepared for? And therefore, the view of the future is going to be the single most important parameter that organizations have to focus over the course of next 2 to 3 months. Over to you, Anuj.
Thanks, Anil. That was fairly comprehensive. So, which brings me to the other part of my discussions that I really wanted to take. I think the backdrop has been set perfectly well. The challenges, quite obviously, of COVID are very huge. Everybody knows them. It's the opportunities that really excite me, because obviously the way you have to look for it is from the positive angle is what are the opportunities. So the cost angle clearly is becoming a dominant factor going ahead. Earlier, cost was not so much of an issue, and perhaps that led to a lot of brands being formed. Maybe brands may lose some shine. I don't know. I would like to ask the panel, do you think brands will lose shine in this cost conscious environment? And also the customer's focus, as you know, the joke going around on WhatsApp, which is the biggest university today, is that the customer is only buying what he needs and not what he really wants. The pun being on the need and the want. Do you think the brands are really going to disappear from a marketing space in terms of a business model? I'm going to try to assemble some of the brand components of a business model. So one is cost, the other is the brand model, third is customer preferences and taste. Do you think these are changing, or do you think a customer section is completely disappearing here? So I'd start with Shubhra because she's the consumer person, and Tanvir, and then Mehul, and back to Daya, and then Anil, in that order. So I will not interfere. Just take on quickly. So
I don't like this. It's like brands will disappear. It's like I will disappear, and I will try my best to survive. So we are so close to it. We breathe in, breathe out. We think brands as people in marketing. So about brands being disappearing, we have seen across, they don't disappear, they repurpose. All right. So when we say repurpose, I'll give you some examples. So for example, you would see that some essential ones would carry on. The way we would buy brands, it is not like just a functional one. It is the whole ecosystem of how you relate, what is the pricing, that will probably continue. Now the repurposing should go on for you to be remaining what we say is brand health, like how meaningful you are, that is how relevant you are. How differentiated you are, like what is the point of time that you're offering, and are you differentiated, and how salient you are you making enough noise to be there on the top? So this whole simple MDS, which is, I think everybody in the brand team would know, the brand health is straight away related that how your brand is going to survive. And overall, you can think in the simple words, brand equity. It's an old lesson, but it will still retain. Simple things like purposeful brands are trending. Now, purpose is something which we are so close to each other that, hey, my brand has to be purposeful. Some of the companies, CPG companies, took it like, hey, I don't think I am purposeful enough. It's like brand say versus brand do. Now we see a convergence between brand say and brand do. That means I might say in advertising, hey, I do this, we should be related to that, but I want to see numbers. The consumers have begun, I want to see what you're doing at the ground. Simple things, I'm going to give example of Lux, which I think most of would identify. It talks about expressing beauty without any judgment. You should not, a lady should not be judged because of her look. She should be judged because of what she is. Yeah. So it was a simple one. Then we all were promoting across. But there's a simple thing that we're also saying that, it has to breathe. It has to repurpose itself, what impact it's going to do in terms of numbers. If you think about Dove, it has done it in terms of numbers of authentic beauty. If I talk about Heineken, we talk about social connections so clearly with us. It's like inbuilt with us, social connection. A social connection now we have taken to offline to online. But yes, there is a brand promise that we will come back. There is a hope that we will come back. So brands will repurpose in all the aspects. And that's a true brand essence, that you live up to the consumer expectation and meet their expectation in terms of meaningfulness, differentiation, and being salient. That's all from me.
Repurposing the brands, which is interesting. So, how do you see this, Tanvir or Daya? Whoever wants to really go first.
Yeah. See, where brands are concerned, let me talk as a consumer rather than as a person selling brands. See, as human beings, we should know, and we all know, that human memory is as fickle as the English weather. This COVID will pass, everything will come back to normal, people will start flocking the malls, and people will start buying brands. So brand managers should not Shubhra should not worry. People will have a whole lot of Heineken. People will come back. Ladies will keep on buying perfumes. See, it's the psyche. One, there will be a segment of people, predominantly Indian, who will say, no, save for the future. Times are bad, and it's very challenging. While the others, they'll say, well, you never know when is the next thing coming in. So let's buy things and let's have fun till the sun shines. So brand is not going to get over. In fact, it will be, I have a feeling people will come back to it more aggressively. So the brand manager should be aware of this, and it is going to happen, I think, 100% more than what it was. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I think just to add on it, what is Shubhra already Tanvir mentioned, I see, Anuj, I think every company need to rethink about the positioning of their product, right, in the market, right? I mean, we're looking at marketing our basics, right, and the marketing skills, what you learn in the book knowledge or in practical knowledge last couple of years. Again, they need to rethink and reposition their product right now in the market. Some of the brand image, brand positioning is changing because of this situation. I look at in the supply chain side, it's a big revolution coming up in the market now, because now everybody, end customer, end user, they think they look at a good example like in US market, right? Because of COVID situation, as an end customer, I need to store my grocery, right, for next couple of weeks, and it's a big change in the mindset, right? We used to go to grocery store or and Walmart, any other store, and buy for 1 week. Now people are trying to stock it. So again, the keep up planning is changing, right? The overall planning is changing, and the brand, again, as I said, Shubhra, Tanvir mentioned, brand image is not changing. The brand positioning has to be changed, and the pricing, same pricing I will see. Only thing is delivery models are changing now, because everybody looking at so they want a home delivery, right? It's a free cost. I mean, companies need to offer something, just we'll do free delivery to you, right? So those kind of things. So again, those kind of service models wise, they have to change, but in terms of pricing, and is not going to change. And the brand image, advertisement may be changing because they need to advertise differently. And I look at now the more job markets, like shifting it from e-commerce or supply chain area rather than other sectors, like maybe tourism impacted, and airlines are impacted, industry is impacted. But I look at more demand is coming in supply chain and e-commerce sector. So I think those companies will more have more planning they can do, and they can have a longer. Yeah. Over to Anuj, I think. Yeah. So.
Okay. Super. So, Mehul, you want to talk about it?
Yes, actually, and really good insights. And if you add two more dimensions, one is the societal norms as we see today will probably undergo some kind of a permanent change, right? In terms of behavioral patterns, in terms of what we think are basics of hygiene, or what we think are basics of how we interact with people. And what's happened is that a lot of our consumption patterns and behaviors are undergoing a change right now, which is kind of becoming the new normal. So brands will continue to be there. I guess that's not never going to be a question per se, but the relevancy of that in terms of how are they actually creating now products, services, offerings, value propositions, which meet that new norm, is where really the challenge is, right? And the opportunity is. So if I look at it from a sporting action standpoint, typically Formula One would look at audiences which can spend $500 to go watch a race, right? And that meant that, and also given the way the action was, it was typically the 35 to 50s and 55s who were really watching the sport. With they taking now a shift towards esports, the younger generation, which now can actually do a $50 game on their PS4 and actually get into it, rather than spending $500 to go and watch an event, that younger lot and younger audience is coming in. So the way they will now need to stage their events, the way they'll have to now build that as a sporting property, and what kind of data you show and what you do will need to change. So to me, it's about what is the brand relevancy that we can create, and still look at what are the audiences hence needing and then appeal to them is where the play will be.
So what I hear you saying is that the brand promise is likely to get morphed completely differently. Like Shubhra said, I think I liked her analogy of brand repurposing itself to deliver a completely new promise in light of the new needs. Because there is no denying that the customer is going to get extremely cost conscious, given the fact that one sees, at least senses a recession ahead. One would expect that people are seeing titans in the industry getting sucked into the whirlpool of uncertainty, and they would want to tighten their belts and figure out what's the way. And therefore, the repurposing of belts will happen. And therefore, Anil, what do you see this in terms of a response from organizations from a purely survival and growth perspective? So yeah.
Sorry. Thank you. I think it was a good discussion that I heard from all the panelists on the brand part of it. I think what is going to be very important from a brand will survive, there is no ambiguity. Whether the brand will deliver the value proposition or the value proposition itself will undergo a change is a matter that we will evolve over a period of time. But I think what's going to be very critical for an organization today is that the whole concept about segmentation, which was used at a very high level, will now need to be brought down to much more micro level segmentation. And you'll have to look at consumers from a very narrow segmental, saying that this kind of consumers will look at this kind of brand proposition, and therefore I will have to position my brand at this. Today, companies like Unilever have a wide portfolio of brands. Will that same wide portfolio be sufficient? But they have 30 brands today in the personal care products. Well, going forward, will the 30 have to become 50? I think that's something which will evolve. But the whole principle about the behavior of consumers is going to become much more precise and narrower. And therefore, the whole principle about micro segmentation that companies have been talking about will have to become very, very critical. And companies, the first response will be to see which are going to be my target segments, what are they looking for, and narrower segments focus, the better will be your ability to sort of identify what do they need, create those brands, products, services to be able to meet those requirements. And the niche segment word will actually dilute, because there is nothing like a niche segment, because there will be hundreds of segments that will exist in the marketplace. And that will be basically a response that not just a marketing organization, I would say that the entire organizational behavior will have to undergo a change to be able to look at the consumer business from a very diverse perspective. Over to you.
So yeah, so what you're saying is OB and OD are going to be the new mantras, where obviously we started from removing the hierarchies, getting faster decision making, faster time to execution, faster reach to the customer, sharper value proposition. Those are the things one hears. Typically, the consulting industry is the largest employer in the world. And obviously there you're sitting right in front of the biggest consulting boom that has happened or is likely to happen in the next few years. Where do you see organizations requiring survival skills, and even our own folks, we are all MBAs here, where do you see ourselves being repurposed, sharpening our skills, redoing our pencils so that we can be more effective for the organizations? And what will the organizations really need to survive? Obviously consulting is going to be one big area, and a large number of people will be drafted in here going forward.
Yeah, Anuj, I think I do see a big change in coming up. Last 2 months, I see almost big change. The way the end customer is looking at us as a consulting wise. Again, it's going to impact overall consulting pricing models we do to end customer. And as a customer getting benefited, they want to get benefited, right? You're not traveling, we want to have a, your hourly rate is dropped down to 50%. So how do you handle that kind of situation, right? We have to look at overall costing for onboarding employee and paying salaries, all those things. So those kind of things they have to companies actually rethink in terms of consulting, and that is impacting overall. And each, I mean, that's again, end of the day, end customer is always right? What do you say? Customers first. So we always need to adjust the pricing models, those kind of things. And as I mentioned earlier, and consulting model, I mean, we have been in calls morning to evening in Zoom or other media. We're using it to reach out to end customer and fulfill their requirements, right? But it may be more productive, as others have mentioned in the panel. It's more productive where you're working remotely and servicing customers. I mean, instead of working 8 hours, we're working 12 hours now. So I mean, that's some way we are trying to fulfill the customer requirements here. So again, as a consulting firms, it's going to be a big challenge, and because of some products or implementations, and because of this COVID situation, some of the projects on hold in the market, which impacts overall economy, including consulting firms. But again, every company is trying to come up with the new ways, new business models to overcome those situations.
Right. So any specific skill sets that you would want to recommend that the organizations really need to build in, and people over here on the panel need to sharpen?
Skills is, I think, mostly we have to use the media more going forward. It's more like a remote consulting work where everybody looking at, we have to look at reach out to instead of in person, we are looking at social media, right? So again, we are using Zoom in this meeting, but again, other media, so people are getting used now. So reach out to end customer, we have to use much media, and in terms of sharpening skills, and then I suggest we have to find the more how to reach out the customer, right? The ways to reach out the customer. I mean, we are more dependent on social media now. That's an important area which has become now.
So you want people, obviously you're looking for a younger set. So, I'm just saying that from time immemorial, the big debate has been a generalist versus a specialist. Somebody who can see a picture from 10,000 square feet up in the sky versus somebody who can actually drill a hole in the well. Where do you see what skill going where? Where do you see people demanding somebody who can see the big picture and also implement at the smaller level, or just a small level guy? Where do you see anybody on the panel who would want to take this on?
If I may, interestingly, I think rather than an either or, I think we need a dual mode management mindset now, right? Where you are able to operate at two different speeds, right? Or you are able to operate at either that high level bird's eye view versus having that attention to detail. Because the fact is there is so much of information now available, and everything that we are doing, we are just generating more and more data and more information. So if you have that bigger vision, then you know what to look for. And then if you have that attention to detail, then you can actually dive into it to solve for it. So in terms of a management mindset, I would say we need to be dual mode managers now and dual mode individuals now.
Yeah. So Anuj, I think to add on to I think what Mehul told, it's more like a digitalization, right? We are in digitalization world, and a lot of business transformation happening across the globe. But I think people are looking, I think we want to use more digital modes where reach out to the customers, as which we talked about earlier, data science area where a lot of demand is coming up now, artificial intelligence, robotics area. So basically, everybody want to automate the processes, and the companies also along with, as well as that's the way I think I'm looking at more like a new generation should focus on, where that's where more focus will be shifting to.
So you're looking like so to take what Mehul said, we ought to become like the eagle, who's able to from the sky see what's happening down, and then also have the ability to sweep down in one quick swoop and pick up what is really required, and pick up to the sky and take home. Having said that, obviously the execution part will be digital and is increasingly turning digital. Intrinsically, the whole model of e-commerce was to remove cost from the operations. It was a cost-sucking, business, which obviously brought down a lot of big countries like the G7, G20, because they removed a lot of middlemen, which meant a lot of people went out of business. The small mom and pop shops went out of business, and e-commerce got enabled. A new kind of employment took place, but they were at a lower skill job and therefore lower cost, and therefore the cost got pulled out of the business. Now this seems to be going even deeper. This goes beyond cost. This is going as to what do you need on a regular fill my tank kind of situation, where I remember when IoT first came in, we would see these ads on TV where the IoT promise was that we will sense, the fridge will sense what is missing in your refrigerator and order whatever is missing, like the bread, milk, eggs, whatever you are consuming on its own, and bring it, take it to the delivery guy who's your preferred vendor, and make sure that it comes home on time. So those are the kind of promises that seem to be coming to root now, closer and closer. Even at the grocery stores, you're seeing high end of automation where you can just walk by with all the barcodes being auto scanned in your purse and the card being debited. So we are going to see highly automated models, which is a challenge for jobs, don't you think? What do you think these people should be doing? Because obviously there is not enough job in the short run. It's like the industrial revolution in the 1890s, where suddenly a whole lot of people just went out of work. And I've not even touched the finance part, where the financial markets are crumbling in terms of supply or in terms of excess supply. So there is excess supply, but nobody's willing to lend because they themselves are short. They've created a hole. So we'll come to that later. But with respect to this cost push, which we are seeing, how do you see organizations in your own space addressing these challenges? Going deeper, because now you're going into supply chain, you're going to get into CRM, all converging into one. So you won't have a separate CRM vendor, you won't have a separate supply chain vendor, you won't have a separate ERM center. You have an enterprise intelligent system that will act on business analytics, do some decision making and execute. Right? Perhaps with some supervisory human interface.
Anuj, this is Anil here. This fundamental principle about cost management and cost reduction has been something which has been talked about by corporates now for 30, 40, 50 years. Whenever there is a decline that happens, cost reduction is the mantra. IT offshoring said cost will reduce. Taking business to call centers and reducing our own people, cost will reduce. But if you look at the financial performance of companies, at every few years, there are layoffs all over the world because of cost pressure. When the business booms, they begin to hire, cost again balloon up. It's a cycle that keeps repeating itself every 5 to 6 years. So, will that same boom or bust happen? Every few years we'll keep talking about cost control, and keep looking at every single element. Today, even supply chain, for example, most countries today have a third-party logistics provider which provides end-to-end supply chain. So it is not that you don't have those cost elements today, but are companies today cost competitive despite all those challenges? Are US companies really cost competitive with 90% of the IT work being done in India and Philippines and all of them, both from an IT and a BPO perspective? The answer is no. You still have the same challenges because organizations have, and when I say organization, I'm talking about human beings. There is a tendency to go back to the old norm of cost, going back to the old level, and therefore we have to go back to this cycle. And I think one thing which is going to be very, very critical in all of that is that jobs will probably not go away. If you recall, when you and I were passing out of the campus, the best company to work for was Tata Business Limited. That was the dream job most people wanted to aspire but that company today no longer exists. If you see, computers didn't exist anywhere in '86 when we passed out. They said if computers come out, people will lose their jobs. Banks will close down. This will happen. That will happen. N number of doomsday stories were talked about. Did that happen? The answer is no. New types of jobs got created. So in a way, if you look at it, organizations will have to adapt themselves to be able to look at what new ways. Will new jobs get created? The answer is yes. Will there be new kind of skills? The answer is yes. Will there be a mix between specialist versus generalist? The debate will always be there. But there is one thing which is going to be very critical is that organizations will no longer be able to say that here is my 3 to 5 year plan. I don't need to really adapt to change. The change will have to be brought in much more sharper, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And we have to look at every single element of my cost, or from a people skill perspective, or from a hiring. You look at any part of the organization, you have to look at from as narrow a window as possible on a rolling basis. And that's what is going to be the single biggest mindset change of agility. I mean, agile is a word that software industry has sort of coined it in a big way, but organizations, and they talk about agility, that I do this faster and all those things, but that's going to be the new normal. If there is one thing which is going to be new normal is agility, because the pace of change is going to be extremely rapid.
So, he talked about costs, and I agree, endorse what he's saying. but obviously cost had, China played a big role in coming out from the cost angle, becoming the factory to the world, and maybe almost all supply chains willy-nilly found some linkage to China. And now there is A, challenge in China, B, there is hostility towards China, 3, there is a huge amount of people dissatisfaction with China across the world. So one is you buying, the other is consumer saying, if it's China, I'm not going to touch. I don't know how far that will happen, how far is the will of the people to do that, but where do you see this China conundrum affecting supply chains? Do you think this will lead to increased self-reliance? The other day I heard PM Modi saying one big lesson of this crisis is self-reliance has to become greater. And I think I hear Donald Trump say the same.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So that's correct, Anuj. I think now every country is thinking, how to be a sufficient to produce what they need, right? Again, they are required to depend on, other countries, right? That's what they are looking at. The shift is changing now.
Yeah, the shift will change, obviously. But at the same time, outsourcing won't stop.
Yeah.
Outsourcing will stop because of cost.
Working from home is given birth to, companies have tasted blood. Now they have seen working from home, they've got a new idea. Companies which I work for, Network International, they shifted their entire operations to India,
right?
Which is very cheap. And so outsourcing will continue. And as I said, people's memory is short. People will forget all this. China will come back. I'm not pro-China or anything at the moment, but I'm just saying, I'm talking on as a human being that people will forget, things will start. Okay, countries becoming self-sufficient will be nothing great. But then as of now, Mr. Modi, good, but let's not talk about Mr. Trump. And let's not get into that.
No, I think again, from US side, I think India will definitely get more opportunities.
India should. Why not?
India should get it. Yeah,
yes,
definitely. Yes,
India
right.
should.
I think because of not only cost and quality, definitely we will. Yeah, that's what matters, right? So
I just saw some statistics. Some 40, 50 organizations, only 3 chose India. Rest went to Vietnam, Cambodia, Bangladesh. People are not choosing India. So for whatever we stand for, whatever we shout.
That again, there is a reason, but one doesn't want to get into that at the moment. So let's leave it there.
So you think politics is the reason, or is it that the cost of the product?
Let's not get into this. Yes.
So I would suggest, I think we have to think about the global scenario and business heads. So for me, if you tell me the cost is more from here, and if you're a business person, even you're based anywhere, I would agree to Tanvir that the business model would be changing. Today, it might not be China. It might be just Vietnam, because Vietnam is least affected. It's not in the global thing. It looks safe. Vietnam, Taiwan looks safe, in Northern Asia part of it. And South Asia, of course, it is India and Bangladesh. But depending on your businesses, that whichever would work, people would chase and businesses would chase. And yes, localization as of now looks fine, and internet also looks fine. I'm just scared now because, of course, I'm in digital transformation, technology, Internet of Things, I'm very close to. But I'm thinking about what if there was a coronavirus in internet? Yeah, so all the models are revisited minus 50 years back. So because I'm not thinking drastically, hey, today this was like we visited, I think Mehul said that we have seen that the bug which came out in year 2000 and everybody was rushing to US that time and the jobs were very hot. That virus, I forgot the name of that virus, but what if it was true now and then it becomes a digital one and we become so robotics, automation, JD.com, EE, we all are talking big time.
But
what
still
if
we'll manage. But we
manage. But we will manage.
We will manage that 2000. We managed 9/11. We are managing this.
2008 we managed now 2020.
Mark my words. On a lighter note, there may be holiday packages in Wuhan 2 years from now onwards. You never know. You never know. Things will change. All people will forget. Everything will come back to normal. Yes.
I don't want our batchmates or the newer generation to think
Mehul may be organizing a race at Wuhan. You never know.
Absolutely. You know, the Chernobyl site where the nuclear disaster happened has now become a tourist destination as well. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I think finally we're all adapting, right? So as the human race has adapted, we'll all adapt to this as well. And the consumerism that is now set in is there to stay. So to go back to that original thing about whether brands will still outsource or whether they'll still want to be, yes, the cycles will happen where there are certain things that you will want to be done closer to home and localization. And like, for example, in UK, there is a big drive that buy local. So for small shops, they actually want to promote people to go and buy from small shops. And so those kind of initiatives will continue to happen. But at the end of the day, what is the value we are providing to consumers? And what actually staying at home has done is that it's made us closer to people who are far away.
Yes.
So you're now talking to more people who are not in your city than, because otherwise you just met with people who are local. So I think that is where the opportunity lies.
Not only because of the sitting at home, with the emergence of these toys, people at home, especially like my wife, always complains that you've become very close to people who are sitting miles away and you're not even talking to us. So it's a general complaint everywhere.
So you were talking
Yes.
to her before. Interesting.
I didn't get you.
No, it's okay. Good you didn't. Safer for you.
Yeah.
So, one thing that has been an undeniable positive fallout, we'll take some questions now, that has been a positive fallout of all this is the environment. We had royally taken and jacked the environment scores over the past several years, decades, maybe the right answer. But perhaps a month or two's lockdown, I think everybody, especially in India and I'm sure elsewhere as well, are seeing marked improvements in pollution levels, in environment, in terms of peace, in terms of even illnesses. The number of people who are actually reporting sick to hospitals has kind of drastically reduced.
Yeah.
So perhaps, as they say, the gross happiness index has actually scaled new high. So I don't know whether it's got to do with proximity at home and talking to people like me on Zoom has helped. But obviously there is a change. Do you think that the average intellectual human being will jettison this as a consumer and still plumb for the older way?
I'll take this in terms of sustainable trend. I know in developed market, we had brands like Love, Beauty and Planet, and you will call a lot of brands which were like in developed nations. When I'm talking about, it's primarily Europe and in some parts of US. They were trending in sustainable sourced, as in the fair trade source kind of people. But when we conducted this survey in Asia, we realized that people don't understand sustainability. Most of us, and I'm not talking with this group because this is a very affluent group in terms of the consumers, but you would understand the first is meeting the needs. There are people who are on daily wages. So even if I say the packaging is, this is more sustainable packaging, this is good for the environment, they would not even understand if it is less price, they will take it. So unless and until that segment, when we call about band 2, band 3 consumers, or which is by and large us, our countries, and unless and until they do and the price sensitivities are reduced, because price is a big driver, it's very difficult to, it's like really short term in terms of environmental. It's because we know if you are an environmentalist, you are not very happy because it's very, very short term. The sustainable wave, how it catches up, probably it will filter down from SSE A1 plus to probably SSE A. But overall, in terms of broad acceptability, unless and until it is price sensitive and it falls into the large mass segment, it's very difficult.
Okay. So what you're saying is maybe 6 months from now, life will be normal and people will be doing exactly what they did before. There will not be any material change. To put Tanvir's SWOT to test, people still vote back the politicians. They have a short memory. They still vote back the same people time and again. No reason why they won't live their life the same way. Go back to China, do the same old things as well. Right. So, Anil, are you back by any chance? If you are, and if you can unmute him, there are a lot of people who are keen to know how the race ended with the Queen.
Thank you. I'm sorry for dropping out. I was talking about agility, and I was not agile enough to know that internet in my house can fail because of electricity, and I should have been on hotspot right from the beginning. So, while that's the point that I think Tanvir was saying, that we'll go back to our own working. So I know it happens, and I'm mentally ready that I have to have a hotspot. I could have started it right up front. Okay. So let me quickly respond to the Alice part of it first, and then to the specific point that you asked. The Alice in Wonderland, basically the point that Alice was trying to ask the Queen was that we have run this now for 2 hours, but when I'm looking outside, nothing has changed in the scenario at all. The same trees that were there were exactly where they are. So what kind of a country is this that nothing is changing after running this? And she says, with my own country, if I had run for 2 hours, I would have been at least reached somewhere. The Queen says, what kind of a slow country you are living in? In this country, if you have to stay where you are, you need to run very fast. And if you have to go ahead, you will have to run twice as fast. And I think that particular analogy was there even 10 years back, or even probably 5 years back. And this is going to increase further, because you will have many more disruptions which will happen, which will result into you having to run much, much faster to be able to stand where you are. If you say that I am a big company, have certain market share, you still have to run much, much faster. The other point about Alice in Wonderland's analogy was that, that Alice asked this question to a Cheshire cat, saying, which way do I go from here? And she says, depends upon where you want to go. He says, I don't know where to go. Saying that, no, whatever you want to go, you do it. So if you don't have a path of where you want to go, then any path will be fine. And the organizations will have to, there is this whole concept about having a vision and mission for the organization, which are good slogans, which are put up on the posters, on the websites, and so on and so forth. Today, organizations may have to start living that, saying that, what is it that I'm going to be 3 years from now? What is it that I need to do to be able to reach there? And so on and so forth. And that's where the Alice in Wonderland analogy became very, very critical. It's an important analogy which was existing, and it is going to continue to remain more important. Coming to the specific question that you were asking, I think what has happened is that the trends of change in the businesses, or due to climate change, or due to any other parameter of consumer behavior, were already visible. For example, if you look at significant number of people were buying from e-commerce much, much more than they were buying from the physical stores. Nothing to do with COVID-19 at all. That change in consumer behavior is already visible over the last 3-4 years. If you look at ordering food from outside, there is a whole chain of restaurants in India which is called Beru's Biryani. Now it operates in 25 cities in India. But do you know where is the restaurant that I can go and have a dine out there? The answer is nothing exists. It's a cloud kitchen. It operates in 25 cities, virtual, in an industrial shed, and people have been ordering from there. It's a brand by itself. So today, organizations have to look for the change in the behavior has already been set in place. In India, the Swiggies and Zomatos or the Uber Eats all over the world been very popular. I think they have been very popular. Will the change continue? I think that change may hasten. So I would not say that things will change dramatically in terms of consumer behavior only because of COVID-19. It's not 0 or 1. Whatever trends we have been seeing will probably get accelerated further rather than trying to get covered. And that's the critical point we need to look at, saying to which trend will get accelerated and to what extent, and therefore how will I be able to adapt to that and be able to actually get into that if required to be able to survive.
Okay, so if I were to summarize what has really happened in terms of discussions, clearly everybody seems to be on the same page that like Don Quixote fought the imaginary devils around the windmill. COVID seems to have created uncertainty among minds, and people are seeing a lot of imaginary devils where none really exists. It's just a situational crisis which shall also pass. And the question is, when shall it pass? It should pass in and around when the vaccine comes. Trends that were already there have been accelerated by COVID. Some of them have been suspended. But once the COVID cloud kind of lifts, we will see a continuation of the old trends, which will be the change that is actually happening over the last 3-4 years, facilitated by technology, facilitated by lots of money coming in. But obviously, we will have a question, like I said, to address these challenges. A floodgates of money have been opened by almost all the developing nations. They have printed money like nowhere else before. I mean, never has US actually pumped something like $6 trillion into the market, and neither is Japan, neither is Germany, neither as UK. So all this money has to settle in somewhere, right? Now, question is, in the past, whenever money supply of this kind has come in, it has led to inflation. And when inflation has come in, asset prices have actually shot up to the sky. But here we are seeing a trend where we clearly know that cost challenges exist. Tightening the belt will happen with the organizations. So where will the people find their ability to adjust to an inflationary asset price inflation if that were to happen? So that obviously is a question mark that lingers everywhere. So if there are any questions, I would love to take them, from the people. People are saying that the panel generally feels that, please correct if any of you have a different view, is that there's unlikely to be a massive change. Business will revert back to near normal, and they will continue in the trend line that they were already trending. The brands will obviously change, adapt, move. The customer will morph to be becoming a more demanding, more cost-conscious customer, and perhaps with sharper offerings. Is that correct in terms of our assessment of the situation?
Anil, when you say Anuj, sorry, when you say that unlikely to be a big change, no, the change is there. It's a huge change which is going on. But then, having said that, things will come back to normal.
Yeah. So
today,
no,
maybe
we can't call suspension of time as change. So what has actually happened is today most of us are living in suspended animation. So when I say nothing much has happened, it's just like you're in a vacuum. And so clearly, the sandboxes that are already existing will stay. The pace of the integration of convergence of the elements in the sandboxes will become faster. Money supply will facilitate some of those changes. Consulting will have its own challenges, like Daya said that he's already seeing a price pressure, right, in terms of what customer wants. So obviously that will percolate across all industries. So if price points are being challenged, so will cost points. And therefore, the cost points will fall, which will lead to perhaps more value to the money that you earn. More value to the money means that perhaps there will be a small cut on salaries, which isn't so bad. If the same money can buy more, I am not complaining. If 100 rupees buys me more peanuts than what 120 did, I have no problem with taking 100 back. So if there are any more questions,
Anuj, not only a couple of salary cuts, there'll be huge, and it's happening. Huge job losses are happening. But then the only light at the end of the tunnel is that it's not just one place. The only good thing about this bad thing is that the entire planet is on the same page.
Correct.
Not even a single portion of Earth which is unaffected. So all of us are on the same page. So when it comes back to normal, things will brighten up. So that's the only thing I can say.
Well, obviously,
it's been just us or just the region, Asia.
There is no doubt on that. Yeah. So there is optimism. I see this as an opportunity to really do things better, to reboot, to do things differently. There's an interesting question on SMEs, especially from India, and I think globally also. They are facing a serious cash crunch. As you know, a lot of these companies, these businesses are supporting their employees who are staying home, and they're not doing any work, but they're being asked to pay their salaries, right? So the costs are running. There is a demand and a supply lockdown. Rarely that has happened where there is a supply lockdown and a demand lockdown. So, but the cost meter is still running. So some of these SMEs obviously are going to be hit. So do you see anything happening in your own geographies that will change the systems? The government in India doesn't seem to be responding at all.
No, it doesn't. As I said,
mental mode, I think.
So UAE being a small portion, the central bank is doing, the government is doing more than enough to help these SMEs coming up. Well, it depends from government to government, from central bank to central bank. So it depends on the geography, as you said.
Depends on the geography.
Yeah.
Singapore is changing. Sorry, Mehul, go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Shubhra.
So Singapore, the 50% of the GDP is dependent on SME. So there are a big move to salvage them, under solidarity package. And there are a lot of efforts from the government to protect them, even so much so that a lot of people who were really offline, they are giving them packages to be e-commerce and go overseas and do things. So it really depends on the government, because this is not solvable by one industry as such. And of course, partnerships are what we see is emerging other than the government. Within the companies, the partnerships are emerging. The back-end system, I know that we're talking about job losses, but there are certain jobs which are really trending in digital, and there is a big opportunity there. Partnership, influencers, people working from home. And I think this group is very vibrant, and especially the younger people are very sought after for their digital skills and how they're connected in social media to be macro influencers. They can really turn around things. So SME, yes, but that's Singapore. I know that it is very, very mindful about protecting the finances first. So a lot of things have gone in, but yes, that's not the case that in most of the markets that we've been seeing.
I think in UK they are paying salaries, right, Mehul?
Yeah, so UK, there are actually some good government initiatives that are there, and especially if you look at from an SME standpoint. So there are 3 initiatives that are very sensible, and everybody who's in finance will see how they've actually tried to do that so that it helps the economy going forward. One is that for SMEs, they've now started sanctioning loans. So there are banks have been instructed to give loans on which there is a delay of how much interest payments needs to happen. And also there is a guarantee by the government of up to 80% of it. So which means that it makes it easier for the banks to actually go and give the loans because the government is guaranteeing it. Now, of course, the catch is that were you a business which was sustainable without this? And that goes to the original point that I said, that if you were a systemic problem in your business, then even the government is not going to come and save you. But if you were a business which could have sustained yourself, so they're helping there. Second, there is a thing called furlough, which has been introduced, where you could actually put your staff, and again, especially useful for SMEs, where you could put your staff on furlough and the government would pay up to 80% or £2,500 every month as salary towards that individual, right? And that essentially means that you can actually get a certain minimum living wage given to your employees. Still, you can shut down the cost completely at your end, and the government supports it in that fashion. And the third thing that the government has done is more in terms of the medium enterprises, where you're not given loans in the same level, but you can actually get a higher loan. But again, goes back to, are you going to be a sustainable business? With some good initiatives here.
I think US has also done something similar because they have a social security net.
Correct,
Anuj,
I think.
Yeah. No social security net.
So the US,
So
I think.
Anything to add?
Yeah, US, I think they do have we have a social security here. I think, there are a lot of unemployment filings. They do get paid for filing unemployment. And of course, there are 2 things happening, right? There are companies are laying off. Some of them started already. Some of them have asked to reduce the salary. As you said, Anuj earlier, okay, 10% cut on your salary. I mean, everybody accepted. Some companies are, employees are getting accepted a model because rather than losing a job, they know they want to take the cut, and that's model. And in fact, government have an initiative to safeguard the small business model companies, right, where they are offering some loans, which Mehul mentioned, like in UK. In US also, they do have some kind of interest-free loans, some of them to support small business models companies, as well as they are offering even mortgages, right? They are deferring it payments wise, so they are saying
payment
for
holidays,
6 months, payment holidays for 6 months, 3 months, 3 to 6 months, they are offering it. So some of the initiatives are business, I mean, government is done here also to safeguard situation currently.
So India hasn't really done much here other than a moratorium for larger businesses and some of the individuals. So the Indian SME sector is really up for a toss. And you also have the additional problem of the financial sector actually going into a toss because of non-payment. Because obviously, as these companies try to default, and I'm sure you're seeing that in hospitality, you're seeing it in airlines, even in some of the countries that you are on panel, that the airlines there are struggling really because the costs are there and they can't be reimbursed because they don't fall under the SME umbrella. And I personally don't see myself traveling on the airplane for the next 6 months because I don't want a risk till there is an, a medicine or a cure available for COVID. I wouldn't want to get myself infected, take even 5% chance. So clearly some of these industries are down in the dumps for at least 6 months to 1 year until we see a cure in sight. I think the startups, so somebody's asked on the startup, I think the startup segment is looking really, really shaky. Those who have got the funds are great, but those who were in the growth now and they were burning dollars more than they were earning, I think like Oyo are getting to be fast dustbin cases. I don't know what's the jury out there on that.
Anuj sir, there are a couple of questions that have been shared with you on WhatsApp. They were asked earlier.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll look at it. Yeah, so anything on startups?
So in Singapore, I can tell you from Singapore scene, I'm not sure about the other regions. So startups, there's been more thrust actually, because we know that's a long-term success where it lies. So of course, there are certain kinds of startups which are getting boosted for sure, which are in digital industry. But till you prove your business model, you can also take fundings from the government, which is IE, which is international enterprise. So, and there are different kinds of loan and investment that the government can do for you. So that we are very close any which ways. So for me, like to understand that startup scene, of course, startup scene, they are the very entrepreneurial ones. They will go ahead any which ways. They will find funding sooner or later. But in Singapore, because the government funds, so that is also a big breather versus the, I would say, small investors, or let's say your angel versus the ventures.
Okay, good. So at least the world is not really ignoring, but India may have a slight problem because the sovereign funds seem to be pulling their money back. That seems to be a clear trend, especially the large ones in Middle East and Norway, and the largest fund, they seem to be pulling their money back because the oil basically driven economies and they need the money back home. So this, do you think this consumer slump, and there is a consumer slump in some industries. I read the Nestle global CEO saying that we have had a bumper quarter because people, what they were going to buy in April ended up buying in March, and we had people stocking up the entire supply that we could really put on the shelves so that they stocked up homes. So we don't know whether we'll repeat the same quarter, but God, we've had an awesome quarter. So I don't know whether now the next quarter will have a slump for some of you who are seeing consumer space. I think there will be a slump, but question is, will it be pronounced is the big question. I don't think beer is slumping, right? The only FMCG product that is on offer today.
No, it is a sort of what we say on trade. So I know that how many people have gone to bars. Tell me, I think none in the past few weeks. So if you see on trade versus which
UK is going to bars, right?
Sorry,
UK are still going to the bars.
No, we all, none of them are going to the bars. So overall, when you see the sales, it is unlike some of the CPGs, which is more driven by what we call general trade or modern trade or mom and pop store kind of stuff in general trade, when we call about like kirana shops. So we see like three kind of things. One is the on-premise, which is the bars, and which is the whole beer industry or alcohol industry, that the socializing happens over the weekend. We all go there, enjoy, and come back. Then the another industry was what is more developed nations, one that, you will buy beer and have it at home. So at home consumptions versus out of home consumptions have changed. And then there's a whole another system. So beer industry in net is affected because the sheer thing, people are not socializing. It comes in sort of F&B. So, but we have seen that people in our industry as such, they are really, really repurposing, or the agile system is coming in. If on trade had stopped, let's go back to the e-commerce and GT and how to give the experiences at home. And even you can brew your beer at home if you have a kit, especially in UK. Mehul, you can try that. So it really, like how agile you can become. So there is an effect, yes, but how we respond is differently.
We are running out of time, but so two quick 30-second answers that I want. One is, what are the 2-3 changes that you see anticipated in consumer behavior? So we can answer that. The second is, this survival question doesn't seem to be dying. Every second guy is asking, what survival skills would companies require? So anybody, 30-second answer. Yeah, go ahead, Tanvir.
Yeah, as a child learns the alphabet A, and that's for Apple. So we MBAs learn the first letters, adaptability. So as we all know, companies will have to adapt as per their geography, as per the circumstances, and adapt to the current situation, current circumstances, and that is the only survival skill they need. If we look at it generally, otherwise people may come out with heavy jargons, and let's see.
In
And
fact,
that's
if I may add to what Tanvir, if I may add to what Tanvir said, it reminds me of 1997 when I was hosting a conference, so to say, on behalf of Somaiya, our institute. And at that time, I'd written my script, and the first line of my script was "Change is the only constant," right? And it's just been true throughout the entire career. So I think it's pretty much that.
The only thing is this one looks like a tsunami change.
Yeah.
Yes.
Different degree of change.
This age group, I'm very optimistic about us, and of course as Indians. I have adapted in every country, done a different job every country. Yeah. So, and in Bombay, I was in advertising, and I went around in different places, different things. But I think they don't understand. I want them to be very optimistic and understand their core strength until they actually the survival. It's not about just survival. If you're good, you would be taken. And if there is a no from a company, there is always another way out to get associated. You might just start together something, 3 of you together, and you might really do well and disrupt the system. It might be like in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 months. Think about the business models. So please be optimistic, and please look inwards in terms of your talents. Please make good friends so that you can be together and do businesses together.
Yeah. So maybe entrepreneurship is a good answer 2 times like this.
Yep.
And God willing, we'll see quite a few clean entrepreneurs. The system needs cleaning up big time.
Yes.
Right. So I think more or less we are done in terms of questions. There is a last one which says digitization and security. So that brings me, I really wanted to cover that in the last. So, Shubhra, just to tell you that there is a COVID in the making in the internet.
Yes.
It's only a matter of time.
Yes.
And I have worked significantly in the cybersecurity space. So I can tell you that we are inches away from trouble. And I actually frown upon people discontinuing the analog systems. And I keep telling everybody that keep your analog systems alive, because you don't know when the digitization would get hurt.
Yeah.
Already you are seeing China has built a tremendous reputation in the spying space, in the viruses space over the matter of few months. So I can tell you China is way ahead in the game, and perhaps they are listening onto this Zoom as well. Zoom, as you know, is run by a Chinese guy, startup Chinese from Cisco days. But clearly, nations are at risk over digitization. So over digitization, I would frown upon, and in my own consulting practice, I tell everybody that your BCP must have a manual way of working, and that has always been true. And even today, I think those who had a manual workaround for today's situation are actually surviving. Those who are completely dependent on a digital channel are actually stuck. So because you can't really get the tire meeting the road. So yes, don't get over reliant on digitization. My view is that we will see this situation on the internet where the internet will freeze.
Yeah.
So I think we are more or less done. I would not want to summarize because we've already overstayed our welcome. Arvind, do you want to butt in and say something and wind this up? Or shall I just say it?
Yes, sir. Just to thank you all. I mean, truly words of wisdom coming in from across the globe. A lot of positives, a lot of learnings for us. So yeah, thank you to each one of you.